Hi, Heather.
Hi, nice.
Very nice to catch up with you here at IVS Kyoto. So, how has it been going for you the last 2 days at IVS Kyoto?
It's been really exciting. Also a little bit exhausting because there's just so much going on and so many people to talk to, but I've been enjoying it quite a bit.
Right.
Yeah.
So, can you tell me a little bit about yourself? I mean, your background and what exactly brought you to Japan and what have you been doing here?
So my name is Heather Dobbin and I'm an executive and leadership coach. I'm also a professional facilitator. So I create programs and trainings for SMBs and also large corporates as well. And I'm a community builder and I work with several communities here at the startup ecosystem. What brought me to Japan is a very long story. I've talked about that before, but essentially, I left the US and went to South Korea, and then I ended up in Japan. And I decided to stay because I was able to found my own coaching company here and find a lot of community and roots. So that's what keeps me here. And I had a lot of different things that I've done since I've been here. I first came over as an English teacher, which is like, sort of what you do to get out of your hometown. I found that I fell in love with education, not so much teaching English, but in love with education. Then I ended up getting into business development, recruitment, educational leadership, curriculum development, all this good stuff. And then I moved to Tokyo and I became the director of programs at an engineering boot camp. And so that's where I sort of started getting into the risk taking world because the people who were going through the program were basically giving up everything and taking a huge risk to change their careers. And through that, I became really inspired, and that's what inspired me to start my own business. So I was mostly working as a solo entrepreneur for about 6.5 years after that. And then I noticed that innovation, one of the things I love about one of the organizations I work in, it's Venture Cafe Tokyo, is innovation doesn't happen in isolation. And I was really noticing that with the people I was coaching and the facilitations I was doing. I was making an impact, but then people go back into their different contexts and really struggle because the culture wasn't supportive or the community wasn't supported or they didn't have support networks. And so that's what sort of got me into the community building aspect as well. So now I sort of approach what I do with founders and creatives and entrepreneurs from three perspectives. One of them being the community side of things, so connecting them with resources, networks, with practical support, and also emotional and social support. Working one on one with the human aspect of individuals, and then also doing facilitations to their companies as well to work on a sort of middle macro, let's say, level of things.
Right. So, you work closely with founders, executives, and creative leaders in Japan for over a decade. So, from your perspective, what are the most common internal challenges Japanese startup founders face? Is it confidence, communication, risk taking, burnout, something else?
Yeah. So I was really thinking about this question, and I think two things: risk taking and burnout. The risk taking aspect of things leads to the communication and confidence, right? So, when you grow up Japanese and as Japanese society, this idea of perfection is very important, and you can see that sort of in the high degree of quality that we have in Japanese products and services. So it has this positive aspect of it. But when it comes to being confident or courageous enough to try new things and also communicate your ideas and your value to the world, more often than not, a lot of the founders that I see here in Japan, and this is also true with executives as well, really hesitate to speak up. And these are, I mean, amazing people doing world class things and just with CVs that would impress anyone. But then, especially when it comes to communicating on a global scale or being able to share their ideas, they really step back and hesitate because it's a risk, right? It's an internal risk. And if they're not perfect, if they're not seen as erudite or, as competent as they would be in their first language, then they simply won't try. We met on the tour that I was guiding here, and I will say, like, half the time when I went to speak with founders of these incredible startups that I would really like to share with the world, there's a huge hesitation, like, oh, I can't speak English, I can't do this. And it turns out that it's perfectly fine. So I would say the risk taking when it comes to interpersonal communication is a really big issue here. And, if you look at the education system, you can really understand why. The second one is burnout. Startup culture all over the world has a lot of grinds, right? But particularly in Japan, because we do have this, like, let's say, like socially accepted status of, like let's work hard. Let's make sure that we're all doing our best. Let's make sure, we don't leave before anyone else. Let's keep going. Let's keep pushing it. I think here more than and then elsewhere, like there's already like a cultural foundation that really encourages that thinking. And so yeah, like that can lead to burnout, right? When you're not taking enough rest, when you're passionate about something but you don't have good boundaries with yourself in terms of like making sure that other aspects of your life are really well tended to. And yeah, I think the other thing too is this leads to another question that I think you were thinking about asking me, but it's becoming more and more socially acceptable to become an entrepreneur. But this idea of doing a startup, of taking a risk, is still quite novel in Japan, I would say. And one of the factors that increases your risk of burnout is actually lack of social support. So I don't know if you've ever founded a company, but if you go home and your family is like, you crazy, you're giving up your amazing corporate job for the stable life. Why are you doing that? Or your friends don't understand it. And this is true for entrepreneurs everywhere, right? Like unless you have friends who are entrepreneurs, like the social support system's like been underground. And so I think that pushback that you can get from your dominant culture can also, I mean, it does increase your burnout risk as well, because it makes you feel like you have to go at it alone. And that's something that I'd really like to help founders with in particular.
So do you think, it's always been, Japanese culture and strong, cultural foundation has always been talked about or, taken as a great strong point. So do you think that in today's context, it's actually becoming a kind of an impediment or baggage? Because from what you say, the whole hierarchical structure of the society and the culture probably seems to be, pulling down people from speaking up or, sharing thoughts and things like that.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why people found startups, because they're uncomfortable within that culture, right? And so, there are strengths to that culture as well, and I definitely don't want to dismiss those. But I do think that there are a lot of people in the Japanese startup ecosystem that are, what would you say, like sort of corporate mystics. And so that creates just like this really interesting atmosphere here. And on the other hand, I think I talked about it a little bit on the tour yesterday. There's a rigidity as well, but there's also a stability. And in the startup world, right, there is a lot of instability, and that can be great, but it can also lead to, again, a lot of mental health issues and a lot of bubbles that burst, right? And it can be quite unsustainable for the founders themselves, their teams, you know, economically, ecologically, right? Like we encounter these issues all right now, especially with the AI boom. So I do think that there are some aspects of culture in Japan that are actually really valuable. But again, it's with everything, right? Like you have access to a variety of ideas and perspectives. This is why diversity is important. And you can choose the combination that works best for your product or your service and ultimately serves your users or your clients and your team and yourself.
Mm.
Yeah.
So Japan's startup ecosystem is receiving renewed attention, right, through platforms like IVS Kyoto, and looks like, most governments or provinces seem to be kind of, on to the startup bandwagon. There's a Sushi Tech Tokyo, there's a Osaka Tech Summit, and of course Tokyo Innovation Base and other community initiatives. So what has changed the most visibly in the founder ecosystem since you first began working in Japan?
My simple answer to that is it's cool to be a founder. So like kakkoi,
It
right?
wasn't the case 10 years back.
No, I mean, no, because you just had a bunch of people who were like extreme, like the outliers basically. But now it's just like more and more. It's like, yes, this is a valid career path, and it's cool to be a little bit risky. So you see people, they've got like interesting hair, and like they're all wearing black and stuff. So I do think that there's a little bit of like positive edginess, I would say, that comes with being a founder, and so that generates social capital. So I'm quite glad to see that. I am also seeing a few more women founders, which is really lovely as well. So those are the two big changes that I've seen personally.
Yeah, so on those 2 points, somebody was telling me that Japanese soaps, television soaps, have also seen a change. Now the protagonist is no more working with large multinational corporations, but is a startup founder. So,
Maybe there's like a chicken and egg thing happening here. Was it on TV first or was it reality first?
uh,
Yeah, yeah.
and with regards to women founders, here at IVS Kyoto, so you see very, very few women founders.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I've been told that in some of the startup competitions, not this one, but other places in Japan, most of the time there's not even one female founder competing there.
Yeah, yeah.
So how do you think, what should be done to change this?
So there are a few things that we're working on. One of them, and so I support several women's communities. It's also an initiative that I work on in the Venture Cafe and Tokyo Innovation Base to support more women founders. The first one is representation. I mean, I myself am the female founder. I'm not Japanese, so it's a little bit different for me. But, when I walk into a room, like in any business setting, I'm a minority. And oftentimes it's not assumed that I am a person who's working in business, right? Like they just assume that I'm like a staff member or a support member, which I do operate in those capacities sometimes. But it's this idea of like representation and people just not assuming that you're a founder. So it makes it uncomfortable. So I think women do start, but then especially when they're very early stage, they go into those rooms and it's disparaging. So that's one issue. So I think simply increasing the rooms where there are more women and understanding that there actually are women founders out there gives you the psychological safety to then build up a challenger's mindset to go into those rooms that are more male dominated and to show up as a professional woman or a woman founder. So I think that's one thing. Actually, the Japanese governments, especially local governments, are really pouring a lot of money into this issue as well because with the population decline, we can't afford to have half of the population not contributing to the economy as well, right? So I do think that there's a lot of support with that. But the main thing I think is more about internationalization too. A lot of the women founders events that I go to, there aren't a lot of Japanese women. And I don't think that that's because there aren't Japanese female founders. That's not true. But there's a big silo between foreign founders and Japanese founders. And I think one of the biggest issues with that is language and cultural barriers. So I do think that we need to have more. One of the things that I like about IVS is that it's very bilingual friendly, meaning like even on the Japanese stages, we make an effort to do simultaneous translation. I think the more we organize spaces that are truly bilingually friendly, and we cultivate, just sort of inviting guests, not just women guests, but also then guests of people of all genders, that will be able to really increase the number of women entrepreneurs. Because you just need to see yourself there, particularly in Japan. I think it's more important here than it is in other places to have representation, although that's important everywhere.
So are there any specific affirmative actions being taken? I mean, you did mention about some of the local governments doing various initiatives,
Yeah.
but like events like these, I mean, I know most women don't want quotas, but in the sense that, how do you get some extra incentive for female founders to participate, to come up, show up? I mean, are there any of these affirmative actions that you see around, I mean, wherever, I mean, not just here, but even in your Tokyo Innovation Base or anywhere?
We have targets, right? I don't think that most companies are doing any kind of affirmative action, but I do see a lot of organizations not really considering like the female presence when it comes to organizing things. Or this is a well-known thing in job descriptions as well, right? When you look at the language that is used to promote a position, even if you have this stated target of having a woman as a leadership position, the language itself is very discouraging for anyone but basically men to apply. And so I think that's true with a lot of events and conferences, right? Like it's got this like very like masculine energy, or even IBS, it's like everything is very red and very intense, and there's like lots of lighting and things like that. So when you look at it from the outside, even if you're not consciously thinking about this, you look at it and you're like, is there a place for women here, right? Or is this very like aggressive kind of atmosphere? And women tend to lead differently, which is one of the reasons why, despite getting like less than 3% of all venture capital, women-led companies outperform non-women-led companies by about 60%. So I think there's a case for really thinking about how inclusive we are. So it can be subtle things like atmospheric things and descriptions for events, or thinking about programs themselves. Or I was on a panel recently and they were like, oh yeah, we really want to hire at our university for women, but we can't find anyone. And then when I was Venture Cafe Tokyo, we organized something called the Living Ecosystem. Within 30 minutes, my colleague Rui Nagamori and I had come up with about 50 women speakers. And you always hear this, like, where are the women? And I think that that's become an excuse. So people need to ask the people who know where the women are and actually get serious about putting them into the program leadership positions, into panel discussions. I really think event organizers should be a lot more careful about being inclusive about who they're inviting to speak as well. Because it's just not true that there aren't women founders, there aren't women speakers, there aren't women professionals. They're there. But are you making the atmosphere that's attractive for them or not? I think would be a deeper question that people need to ask.
So you moved from the US and built a professional life here in Japan for more than a decade. What helped you survive? Not just survive, but thrive in Japan's business and startup environment. And what lessons from that journey might be useful for foreign founders, female founders?
Yeah. You know, it's funny. I was talking to someone about a service that I'm really building and offering right now, which is human skills for founders. And they said to me, "Oh, yeah, we have a diversity thing coming up next." And I was like, "No, this is a foundational thing." And so, why I bring that up is I am naturally like a highly relational person. And Japan is very relationships oriented. It's based on trust, it's based on patience, it's based on consistency. And because I have lived in at least two countries now and I've built up the ability to do that, I think it's allowed me to really create the connections and the atmosphere of what I need to be able to thrive here. And I don't think that a lot of I think that founders particularly need to focus on building those relationships. So anyone who thinks that relational skills, communication skills, emotional intelligence, all of these things are not important, I would really encourage them to look again as those have equal weight here as strategy, as capital. And so that would be my advice. Like, come in, get the soft skills you need, build the relationships, and then be successful. And that's true for foreign founders. That's true for male founders as well. And I also think that's true for vegan founders.
So, as IVS Kyoto brings together founders, investors, and ecosystem builders from Japan and overseas, what would you like the startup community to discuss more honestly, especially around inclusion, mental health, women's leadership, and the human cost of entrepreneurship?
It's more the same thing. Start taking it seriously, particularly now with the huge disruptions that we're seeing due to AI. Human skills are more important than ever. So I hate it that I call them human skills because I hate it that they're called soft skills. That degrades them. It makes them seem less important. But as more and more of our knowledge work and our technical skills are taken over by machines, basically, what's left, right? And so I really want to see this as a stronger focus, and I want it to have equal weight as everything else. And I think that the people, there's a huge report McKinsey put out one called Women in the Workplace. Every company that focuses on these things properly as well, not just performatively, because there was a big issue with a lot of DE&I initiatives being just pure performance and not actually being effective, but really taking it seriously, they outperform their peers. And that's going to be the differentiator now for the next decade or so take it seriously.
What would, in your opinion, be a healthier and more inclusive Japanese startup ecosystem about 5 years from now? How would it look like?
I would really love it if we had cyclical cycles of hustle. I'm a big fan of hustle. You know, we're here at IVS and we were just talking about, are we going to side events? How do we make sure we're properly rested so that we can actually show up to make these connections that we have to make and not just be exhausted? So I would love to see people embrace that cycle of hustle, not grind. So just make sure you're looking at yourself and your company and your team holistically. Okay, now I have to put in a little bit more effort, but how long can I continue this? Can I schedule some time or can I make boundaries? Or can we make, like, let's say, collective commitments to make sure that we're doing other things, right? Besides building, 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 building all the time. And I think if all parts of the ecosystem agree that this is important because we need to move forward together towards a more sustainable future, it's completely possible. But we have to have that culture shift. So people are thriving, they're contributing for, longer term. A lot of social problems are being solved like through this more sustainable leadership style. This is what I'm seeing as the healthy ecosystem. I hope I get to see it before I die.
I was just asking for 5 years.
Yeah. Well, okay, 5 years. I know, like, okay, I got to step it back down. Like, let's say startup founders have some hobbies. And okay, the divorce rate for founders is lower. Yes.
Wonderful. It was a pleasure speaking with you, Heather. Thank you very much.
Thank you.